There's so many interesting levels in this readings. Both the Bible and the Gita today will just sort of cast about for a while and talk about some of them. The quotation from the Bible that's given, he was not the story of them casting out devils and so on. It's a very interesting picture because what you have there is, here Jesus has his followers, and he's this very charismatic rabbi, and there's people who've joined with him, and because Jesus was sent to the Jews at that time to reform and to progress and to reform what was going on in their religion, they were very factionalized. He was against the Pharisees. There was all these arguments going on. So the fact that they were followers of Jesus made them very distinct in the group there, because not everyone was a follower, and many people thought Jesus was a charlatan, and others thought he was the Messiah. So all of these things are going on. So they all know where everybody stands. It's a small community, and they all know where everybody stands. So the disciples of Jesus, who are probably a little bit proud of that, or at least identify with it, see somebody else who isn't really following any of the rules, isn't really part of the group, and he's doing this work, which is the same work that Jesus was doing. Casting out devils was how they described it, maybe literally, because Jesus often took people who were possessed by dark, disincarnate entities and did cast them out with his divine power. There's a lot of interesting stories about that. So I guess either this was happening more then, or people called a lot of things this. So there's somebody somewhere who's saying, get thee out of this soul, and casting this devil out in the name of Jesus, or however they referred to him at the time. And so they're thinking, well, who are you to be taking the name of Jesus? You don't follow any of the rules. You haven't signed up as a member. You don't support. You don't come to the dinners. You don't have a name tag. You don't have all these things. And here you are invoking this name. And they probably thought that they were doing a good thing. So they came to Jesus and said, we told him to stop. What right did he have to do it? And Jesus' answer was to expand their understanding. He says, well, if they're not against us, they're with us. What difference does it make if they're doing divine work? Now, the key to all of this understanding, which the key to understanding the whole Bible, is what Jesus meant. What was Jesus referring to when he referred to himself? When he said, I and me, what was he talking about? Was he talking about Jesus, the man in the physical form who was born and in a very short time was killed in such a dramatic manner? Or is he talking about the consciousness that he was an expression of? Well, obviously, sometimes he was referring to his own body. He often, Master described it, he called that the Son of Man, because it was the physical body. The Son of God was the consciousness. And most of the time, when he said I or me, he meant the consciousness that he not only represented but expressed, because you also have to understand that what made him the Christ was there was no ego identification anymore. We are egoic in the way Master described it because we identify with our limit, starting with the body. It's not just the physical body, but the astral body and the causal body too. We identify with this limited form. And it's not that we have become it, which is a very interesting point. We merely identify with it. And because we identify with it, when we say I and me and mine, we're talking about all the things related to this. As one advances spiritually, one identifies more and more with the greater reality. So even when we say I or we, you might mean your family or your nation or your spiritual family. Just even as a matter of course, that's how you would say it. We would talk like that. But even more deeply, it's who do I think I am? Well, Jesus knew who he was. He was the Son of God. He was an expression of the infinite Spirit. So when he says, if they're not against us, they're for us, meaning if they're acting on behalf of that infinite Spirit, who cares what they call themselves? Who cares what they do? It's not presumptuous in that sense to align themselves with me, because we're all working together for the same cause. The real enemies in these situations are the atheists and the materialists and those who deny the concept of spirit altogether. A few years ago, in a sense of misguided something or another, I accepted an invitation from the Santa Clara County Atheist Society to appear at a public forum that they were having with this big celebrity atheist who is the man who has been conducting lawsuits to get the Pledge of Allegiance out of the schools, I think, One Nation Under God. And then he was filing a lawsuit to get In God We Trust off the money. This man is a highly educated man. He's a lawyer himself. That's why he can do this. He's both a lawyer and a doctor and all these things. And he was coming, and he was a big cheese. And so they decided they would have this panel of religious people and atheists. And we would all present our side. It was why I said yes, I have no idea. I didn't tell anyone that I was going because the more I knew about it, the worse it got. David came and just sat sort of calmly in the background and gave me an anchor point. Well, the end of all of this is there was a couple of Christian people. There might have been a Buddhist. I think I was supposed to be a Hindu. I'm not sure who I was. The other church people, and with all due respect for them, most of the other church people, were so sort of steeped in this any way is the right way kind of energy that they were trying to be very conciliatory. And my ally in that situation turned out to be a very narrow fundamentalist Christian. We were sitting right next to each other, and as the whole thing unfolded, and well, it was awful. When the state president of the Atheist Society came, I actually thought he was kidding, like he was in a Halloween costume or something. Like if you had thought, let's do a really, I'm being so rude to him, but he deserves it. If you thought, let's do a really bad B-grade movie and let's get the state president of the Atheist Society. He had dyed black hair, so he had that really sort of black look. He was all dressed in black, and he had what I can only call the eyes of a depraved sensualist. I mean, he just looked like someone who was, who was going to grab any woman who went by, and he just looked horrible. And the whole atmosphere, was horrible. That's the only word I can use. And the more it sort of went on, the more this Christian guy and I just huddled together. Literally, we were leaning into each other like this because we just felt like, truthfully, nobody else in the room could see what was going on. It was like just the two of us were the only ones who could tell how dark the determination of these people was to take away from everyone any kind of aspiration. And he was a very nice man. Like being a fundamentalist preacher was his second career. He'd been a Silicon Valley engineer before that. So we were sort of in tune with each other. We're chatting, and in undertones we're talking to each other. And at the end of it, I said to him, in other circumstances, we wouldn't be allies. And he said, I know, but here we can both tell, can't we? But it was very powerful, because he who is not against us is with us, And in that case, those who were against us were so strong that our differences meant nothing compared to that. And that's what Jesus was trying to say. Now, the opposite quote is the one that people quote the most. He who is not with us is against us. But that quote came out when he was accused of doing the devil's work by casting out the devil. And he said, well, that's crazy. If you're doing God's work, if you're not aligned with God's work, then you must be aligned with the dark work. And now the dark, you have to understand, I'm not up here saying, beware of the devil, you've got to look out. He's going to come with his little forked hooves and all of these things, and he'll throw you into hell and all those. That's not about that. Because the other aspect that is described, that is implied and described in this particular set of readings is this point, the way Swami makes it. There is a place, and it's a fundamental place in the spiritual life, for conviction and for loyalty and for a very clear sense of this is what I understand to be true, this is what I'm living by, this is the rule, really, that I will run my life by. We can't just be random. In that atheist forum, what I saw too much in some of the other religionists was that, well, so everybody has their own point of view, and if this is how you believe, then that's fine, and you become, as Swamiji said, so wishy-washy that your brain has fallen out. It was not a time to be broad-minded, because there was clear lines going on there, and we either stood for this understanding that we aspire to something, or we don't stand for that. It was just as clear as that. We're either pulling consciousness down, or we're lifting it up. Now, this point Swamiji is explaining when he expands on this reading. And he talks about the difference between dogma and dogmatism. A dogma is simply a stated fact, something that one believes to be true. The sun rises in the east. That's a dogma. Because it is. It rises in the east. I would say that the fact that that souls reincarnate is definitely a dogma of self-realization. It's very difficult to make the law of karma work if you don't have reincarnation. I think the law of karma is also a dogma of the path of self-realization. The fact that we meditate by becoming silent and going inside, that we meditate at the spiritual eye, because that's how the flow of energy works in the spine. And when we draw our attention to this point, it has certain other effects. These are the dogmas of self-realization. And to not be able to just stand strongly, and we're only acting according to the best that we know, but the best that we know we can have a lot of conviction in that. And this is the second reading, which is the Gita reading. You have to follow your own dharma. You have to know what that dharma is, and you have to stand by it. And maybe as you grow and change, that may shift your understanding a little bit. But at a certain point, we have to be able to trust our own experience and commit ourselves to that experience. That's extremely important on the spiritual path. The end of Jesus' life, when he started declaring, "Eat my body and drink my blood." And in the Bible, that was like, now everybody says, oh, here's the wine, here's the bread, the blood is the wine, the bread is his body, munch, munch on the bread, drink the wine, then you've eaten the blood, you've eaten the bread and drunk the wine and so on. But when Jesus did it, there was no church to sort of lay it out. Jesus literally just started saying to people, eat my body, drink my blood. And you're sitting there, and all of a sudden this rabbi that you followed for a long time is saying something a little strange, right? Now, in the Bible, it says so charmingly, I love this, the disciples said one to another, this is a hard teaching, These are real people. They just looked at each other, this is a very hard teaching. Everything's been going really well, but I think he's lost his mind. What do you think? Because it says, from that point, many walked with him no more. That teaching challenged them to such an extent that they left. And then Jesus turns to Peter and says, are you going also? Just like, what do you think? And Peter answers, he says, Lord, where could I go? Now, there's a level of teaching in that's so profound. The first is his absolute loyalty to Jesus. Jesus had given him so much that now at this point, oh, this isn't working for me, I'm just going to go away. Or even, to take it to a very far picture, maybe Jesus is a little confused at this point. Peter's been his friend in good times. Oh, but now you're a little confused. I'm gone. I'm out of here. The thought never occurring that maybe for all that Jesus has given me, perhaps I need to stand by him and give back to him in this moment. One doesn't think that way about a self-realized master, but one needs to think about it himself. In Autobiography of a Yogi, when Master meets Sri Yukteswar, there's an exchange between them where Sri Yukteswar says to Master, I believe this is correct, if you ever find me to be anything less than a Christ-like master, you must take my head and put it on your lap and bring me back. Now, here's Master saying, you're going to give to me, you're going to give to me. And Sri Yukteswar says, this is a relationship of mutual responsibility. You see how much that elevates everything that we're doing? We're only thinking all the time about what can I get. But loyalty, the willingness to give, reciprocity in these relationships is also fundamental. So when Peter responded to Jesus, he was acting from a high level on many, many levels. But the other part of it that's amazing is that he did not say, oh, this is no problem for me because I intuitively understand what you're doing. So you don't really know whether he did. Now, if you can understand intuitively, which is not the dogma of the church, which has become dogmatism, which I haven't gotten to yet, but the dogma, eat my body, drink my blood, who is the person speaking? What is he referring to? When Jesus speaks of himself, does he mean eat my flesh and drink the red liquid running through me? What is Jesus' body? What is his blood? And that's how Master interprets that. His body was infinity. His body was all of creation. His body was the Om vibration, the substance of which everything is made. The blood is the awareness of Christ's consciousness flowing through, animating us. We are animated by the divine. We are made of the Om. Eat my body. In other words, take into yourself the Om. Drink my blood. Take into yourself the Christ consciousness. This is how Master declares, this is what he meant. And for those who had ears to hear, they knew exactly what he was talking about, because as soon as he said the word body, it didn't occur to them that he meant this. Of course he meant something more profound than that. So to take it one step further, which is the point here, what Master said that test was about was testing the intuition of the disciples, not merely their faith in Jesus, but their faith in themselves and their own experience. You see, I've been with this man, I know who he is, I felt his consciousness, I have been transformed by it. I'm not going to be thrown off just because for 1 minute I can't tell what he's doing. I'm not going to be thrown off because many are walking with him no more. This is my path and I will stay here. Okay? And that is a fundamental aspect of the spiritual path until we have the courage to say, this is what I understand to be true, this is what I'm going to do. We often tell people when they're new on the path and they're challenged by their family about this thing and that thing, and they end up in these long conversations trying to explain spiritual truths they barely understand themselves. Don't even bother. Just say very simply, it's working for me. I understand it. This is as much as I understand. As step by step I'm following this. It resonates with my heart. This is what I'm doing. We don't turn into dogmatists. We don't become dogmatic and let dogmatism take us over. This is the truth. This is my way. I know it now. I've found my path. No. These are the principles that we're following. What Swamiji says is a dogma is a definition of truth. Dogmatism is when the definition becomes more important than the truth. Jesus Christ is the only one, and if you're not following Jesus Christ, you're going to hell. That's dogmatism. We have the new way. This is the new path. This is the way of the future. We are going to lead everyone into the great new age. That's dogmatism. But we have to have the courage to perceive the truth, to stand strongly in it, and not feel just because everything can be distorted that nothing is true. And this is like, sooner or later on our spiritual path, we will all be tested. Every so often, through the course of Ananda life, it's very pleasant to have been following this path and been around with it for more than a minute, because you begin to see certain things rolling through. And one of the things that always rolls through is what Master calls the test of negativity, which is either it arises in oneself, or more likely it kind of goes like an influenza through the group. One person will begin to start sort of speaking about, this is a very hard teaching, do you think they've gone nuts? And in a path, any spiritual path that has any energy at all, that is in any way challenging the way our consciousness is right now, it's going to be pushing us past what we're already comfortable with. Whatever that might be. It's been very interesting over the many years of Ananda. It hasn't happened as much more recently because we've just been more clear. But every 5 years or so, from 1970 on, something would happen that would just challenge everybody to find their footing again. Whether it was the fire, whether it was when Swami Kriyananda decided not to be a monastic and got married for a number of years, when he introduced the Festival of Light and took us out of our street clothes and put us in these costumes. You know, when he introduced the Festival of Light and all of a sudden, oh my God, we had a ritual, something we did every week. That was the end of our freedom, obviously. I mean, 20 years later, you think, what was the big deal? But these things would come and they would discombobulate us. Or Swami Kriyananda himself would do something startling, which is basically his job, is to do startling things over and over again, just taking us outside. You know, and so then this negativity will come. And at first you get very alarmed. Oh, so-and-so is speaking against so-and-so and they're gossiping over here like this. And then after a while you just think, it's a test, Master said. And this is the interesting part. Everybody has to face it. Sooner or later somebody's going to come up to you and tell you the scuttlebutt about what you believe in, tell you how terrible it is in one way or another, and you're going to have to find out what you yourself really believe. And why you believe it, and how strong you can be if nobody else believes it. Ananda has been wonderfully tested in this way because we've been attacked, you know, and Swami Kriyananda has been attacked in just the way of the world. You raise up a big force of light, there is a counterforce that's going to try to take it down. And in the midst, when those things were happening in more public ways here because of lawsuits and various things, and people would come to me and say, you know, what's happening here like this, and I would try to say, sometimes I would lose my center, I must admit, but I would try to say, I don't know, what do you think? Well, you've heard this and you've heard that. What do you think? Because what good would it do to try to persuade you, to persuade anyone that this is true? Because you must follow your own path. You know, better to follow your own dharma. You have to find your own footing. Because if your spiritual life is just based on what other people have said, and this is how spiritual tests, what they're always about. A spiritual test is always about, what is my real faith? What do I really believe? You know, when everything gets really tough, where does my consciousness actually go? And there's not a devotee living, no matter how advanced, that doesn't just keep coming back to that again and again and again. Swami Kriyananda once, when he was in the midst of those great difficulties at that time, just felt suddenly like, why is Master allowing this to happen? And that was when he prayed to Babaji, Babaji, why are you letting these unscrupulous people destroy my reputation? You know, it's a natural question. I've given my life to God. I've been as sincere as I can, and this is my reward. And the answer he got was so expansive. He felt Babaji's voice inside of him, and he said, they're all my children. Meaning you think, well, there's you and there's them and all of this, but it's all just an interplay of light and darkness. And everybody has their part to play. And afterwards, Swami said, it's not enough for me merely to accept my spiritual tests. I have to love them, he said. I just have to love them. I have to be so happy that, look, I'm getting one more chance to find out what I really believe. When nothing has worked out the way I've expected, when everyone has betrayed me, when my best friend is just filling my head with negative ideas, who am I really? And what do I really believe? Because dogmas merely help us to see clearly what the truth is, but we're not saved by dogmas, and we're not saved by believing. We're saved by the inner experience, the actual realization. That's the only thing that ever matters. I was brought to the spiritual path to a certain extent by this experience I had one night. And it was a mental experience, but it had such a profound effect on me. I was 18 years old, and I began to think very seriously about the hour of my death. I wasn't ill, I didn't expect to die young, nothing like that, but I knew, obviously, that I was going to die. And I also knew that when I died, it would be now. You know what I mean? It's like, I think it's going to be in the future, but when it happens, it's not going to be future, it's going to be now. And I'd never been with anybody who had died or knew anything about it, but of course we've died many times because one of the dogmas of self-realization is reincarnation. So I just pictured myself just breathing my last. I think I pictured myself as being rather old, but I was breathing my last. And I knew that when I began to die, that everything else would disappear and become irrelevant. Didn't matter how many people loved me, how many children I'd given birth to, how loyal a husband I had, how many awards I had. It would all just go away. And things would get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Now I've helped a number of people, been present when people have transitioned, so I've really seen it happen exactly like that. Things get smaller and smaller till there's just the in and the outflow of breath, and then that stops. And then the consciousness goes away. And in many cases, there's a sense of extraordinary joyful release at that moment. So here I am, 18, imagining that, thinking about where my life is going to go, and suddenly everything became about that fact, which is, in the end, all we have is our consciousness. You see? And our consciousness is our actual experience. It's not our clever ideas, it's not our intellect, it's not how many other people agree with us. Nothing. It's just when we breathe in and out in that last moment, what do we actually know to be reality? That's the magnificence of the path of self-realization. Yes, we're banded together in this beautiful church, but we're just doing that because it helps us individually to be able to breathe in and out with an ever deeper awareness that the power behind us is God. Bless you.